Hello to everybody. So I know noon is not a very good time to start a communication, but you're in a cool air, and I take you to little trips. I will show you some smaller scale project, but I hope you like it. So for those who don't know me yet, as I'm part of the furniture of YellowScan almost, I'm a geologist and geophysicist by training, and in 2015, I create a drone mapping company. I quickly use the LiDAR sensor to solve the lack of financial means of an archeology association. That's how it starts. They had contacted me because they had before its eyes a hill to be a Roman oppidum and covered with forests, and that they could only study with LiDAR. I present this case in the YellowScan days, I think in 2019. Since then, I've carried out 75% of my activity in archaeology and heritage conservation. From Neolithic to World War II, actually. I have chosen a few emblematic cases, either for the remains revealed or for the type of application which is unusual for their accessibility. If I have time, I'm not sure, I will talk about LiDAR surveys coupled with other sensors such as magnetic and thermal. Okay. So what are our customers and what are they asking for? Archaeology application is different in the sense that we are not looking for more accuracy, but for a larger ground point numbers density in order to find decimetric or metric anomalies in the microtopography. Whether they are clients belonging to associations, universities, research institutes, or administration, French administration, for example, they are usually familiar with drones to make photo reports or photogrammetry of their excavation. Some interpret aircraft LiDAR data. Some use GIS softwares or point cloud editors, but quite few, actually, on average. Their ultimate goal is to get a DTM, a shaded DTM. The interpretation is done by comparison with the aerial photo. We are looking for traces of human occupation. We check that this does not correspond to recent traces, and the archaeologist will check it on the ground if necessary. I try to be alongside my clients to present the result from different angles that they might not have thought of, like different post-treatments, but they also have a different eye on the cartography produced, and sometimes it's very efficient too. The first site I choose, which is not under tree cover, is to illustrate the importance of data interpretation processing for archaeological interpretation. I believe this is the link in the system to be improved, and that advance in other areas, such as, for example, satellite imagery, will soon allow us to read our results even better. And we are working on it with different partners right now. So here is a 90-hectare plot northwest of Paris with suspicion of Roman temple. Here. Seen occasionally by plane. A DTM has been produced. Here it is. It is not very telling at the first reading. Here is the effect of a simple post-treatment in addition to the classic shading, which immediately give us another reading of it. The alignments have been correlated with various documents, including the Napoleonic cadastre in yellow and the current cadastre in red, to sort out the artifacts that have a chance to be correlated with remains. The blue marks are the suspicious of remains. The traces seen by plane allow us to calibrate and to locate other equivalent traces nearby which deserve to be observed by radar on the ground, for example, before excavation. There are sometimes much more obvious traces, even in a dense and persistent forest here and at altitude of 1,002 meters in Haute-Loire. This known habitat under excavation is probably medieval. The TTM, so here is the excavation. The TTM of the same slope over 60 hectares make it possible to locate other houses with the same LiDAR signature. So let's stay in the mountains. I told you about how to reach sites. Here is an area next to Chambéry, above Lake Aiguebelette. The request was a mapping of a crossroad of Roman roads that cross the Alps commercially, linking Milan to Lyon in the old time. The steep gradient and the distance forced us to climb about 1.5 hours on foot. I had to look for gaps in the trees to take off, and at high points if possible. The strips of the flight had to be drawn perpendicular to the direction of the Roman roads so that I could walk and follow the drone without losing the radio signal during the flight. So here is the DTM produced, and it even shows some hidden building here. So let's go back down to sea level. I present to you the islet of Tomblaine. Difficult to access since in the middle of the Bay of Mont-Saint-Michel, in Normandy, for those who don't know France well. The distance is 4 kilometers from the coast, which can only be done by foot or horseback. It is imperative to leave with a licensed guide and complete the mission during the low tide. The tidal range there is 10 meters. The island is also an ornithological reserve, inaccessible during nesting season. So we took out again our backpacks and were forced to fly with somewhat strong wind. I flew, the flight I piloted from the sand failed because the island was a radio screen between the drone and the remote controller. So I had to take off from the top, from a rather cramped summit, and I chose to land 45 meters below. I did one cross flight here, the low vegetation being very dense and slope steep. There are indeed traces of an ancient construction. The first occupation described is from 12th century with the construction of a priory and later a fort. During the various wars, the islet sheltered either garnison, rampart against the English, or sheltered French nobles who had escaped from the guillotine after the Revolution. Point cloud, DTM, ARSM, residual surface model, and 3D are in the hands of archaeologists now for finer interpretation. Since we are in Normandy, I will show you a beautiful medieval complex with the upper and lower court system. The top is already equipped for the public. So here is the DTM. A vast enhancement project is underway, which will begin with a 3D virtual reconstruction of the complex. Another subject, let me introduce you now the Canal Louis XIV, 60 kilometers southwest of Paris. This canal, which was designed by Vauban, was intended to supply the fountains of the park of Château de Versailles, which water taken from the Eure River to the east of Chartres at 80 kilometers. At the height of the work, 40,000 men, mainly soldiers, took part in it, on the works, before the resumption of the war meant the abandonment of the project. The canal has been flooded over the first 40 kilometers at ground level, up to here. Then, from this point, the topography and the crossing of the valleys required an embankment and hydraulic works, including the aqueduct still visible in Maintenon. So we are here. So here's the wooded area, of which we made the LiDAR map on the first 2 kilometers, here in red. And we are working this month on the continuation over the 9 kilometers next week. So here it is, the map. The DTM, surprised with the good conservation of the geometry of the canal built more than 300 years ago, now under vegetation. And if you go around, you don't see much, about just some piles of you don't know what. Here you can see the borough areas, here. For the constitution of the embankment. Calculation of volumes and slope have already corrected the writing of engineers of this time. Here too, a touristic development project is in the form of a pedestrian and educational trail over 6 kilometers is underway. Let's stay in the 17th century with the Château de Dampierre en Yvelines, recently bought and reopened to the public. We map the 40 hectares of the estate as part of the archaeological diagnosis before works. The estate includes the main castle, here, several buildings from different periods, gardens, lakes, canals, vegetable garden, and a large hunting estate. The interest is to identify each zone, possibly discover a vestige there, check the periods compared to what we know, and complete its history to better tell it. Here is a full DTM. I'm going to focus on 4 little areas to show you some of its potential. So, here LiDAR mapping has also benefited to the water company in its environmental project of renaturation of 2 little rivers that crosses the park. Compared to the existing plan, the LiDAR make it possible to locate the old bed of the river in the marshy plain. And here, we see that the river was diversed for the construction of the gardens of the castle at this time. Another sector, the old maps show a building called the Pheasantry, which no longer exists on site. And yet, the DTM shows traces in the forests under the bushes. Moreover, you see traces of old ponds and paths not visible in the current forest or aerial photos. Let's go up to the hunting area on the plate. The small depressions are reminiscent of millstone quarries. We can assume that they were exploited for the construction of the castle. Mineralogical analysis which should confirm this hypothesis. And then, if you zoom at random, here for example, you can see a multiplicity of traces, vestige of intense human activity that had succeeded over time and recorded by the soil. So, now let's change the era to the 20th century in Vexin during World War II between Paris and the English Channel. In the middle of this forest, a structure is known as the German hangar. I don't know if the translation is good. Built during the occupation. This rather discreet place would have sheltered German planes, but there are no runways around in the immediate vicinity. However, you can pick up fragments of concrete bombs. So here's the woods. The microtopography of the area around this arch revealed the presence of a 80-meter-long form of boat. You can see also several bomb impacts around. In fact, it was a practice bombing target for German pilots before going to the battle over the Channel, La Bataille d'Angleterre, starting in July 1940. So I promise you to take you to Madagascar. Here we go. I perform a few missions abroad because of concern about drone aviation regulation outside France, and also because the problem of carrying LiPo battery on planes. So for me, in order to fly abroad with drones, I have two possibilities. Either take the train. This is what we choose for sites in south of Italy last December. Well, one day of a train. Or take the plane with our old faithful drone, kind of M600, whose less powerful batteries can be taken into the cabin. We work on the Île Sainte-Marie in the northeast of Madagascar. This is the bay I'm going to talk to you about. It's here and here. So we were working with a team of archaeologists whose association subject is the piracy of the 17th and 18th centuries. The mission was sponsored by a large audiovisual production company for a 90 minutes documentary film that you will soon be able to watch on Arte TV in French for now. The bay was the landmark of pirates who plagued on the course of the trade to India. All plans indicate some construction, fort walls, and that was our starting point. The water of the bay are home to the wreck of 4 to 5 ships, either stranded or sunk on purpose by pirates when they were pardoned and paid to go back to France. 19 flights of 15 minutes each were made in 3 days and calculated with the new cloud station. The rest of the 7 days were necessary to recover the filming and flight authorizations which have been withdrawn from us during our way to go there. So here is a part of the point cloud, and here, just for fun, a little island we had to cover from a distance of 400 meters from the coast. We also have to consider the constraint of film production and sometimes do a bit of staging. So I returned only a month ago, but here is the first interpretation of the DTM of the south shore of the bay. Despite the tropical vegetation, archaeologists have already identified traces of constructions and remains. The fort on the north of the bay, which now an active military garrison, it was also covered with LiDAR. Here is a DTM, which made it possible to model it and find traces of the more original pirate fort. This first construction was then enlarged and reused in the 18th and 19th century. And thanks to our maps, among others. Some remains have been already excavating the following week after my trip by students from the University of Antananarivo, a partner of the operation. I had to make the interpretation every night for the next day. A word on a rather new way to display maps on 3D models. In the archaeology projects, there is the scientific side of the mission and often the communication side of it. The goal is to show and interest the public. So I want to share this rather new technique that some of my clients have adopted to show pieces of their excavation, for example. The holographic window display. In those 3D objects in the form of a video file in the space, float in the space and look like an hologram out of the Star Wars. I have some apologies because I have thought I would bring one to you, the small one, but it weighs about 40 kilos with the carrying case, and I gave up my idea. I didn't have much time neither to film a properly DTM floating in the space, but I guess you get the idea. This is an inexpensive and promising possibility of display. So here I am at the end. I was on purpose very superficial in many subjects, so feel free to ask me questions. Just before I finish, I just want to add that over the years, I was really satisfied to work with your team, YellowScan team, and a special thanks to the technical support who had some time to rescue me from critical difficulties in the field. So thank you very much.